Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 95 of Stepping Wild. The trail didn't improve. Tibs couldn't even find evidence of Charlie's passage with how buried the markers were. Clearly his fighter, Maroc, knew the trail well enough he hadn't had to unearth the marker to unearth them. They'd also been careful not to leave traces of their passage. It was impressive, considering they didn't have elements to undo the damage setting up camp caused. Every few days, he took the time to test another combination of elements. Water was the element that changed his personality the least when combined with most of the others. Wood, earth, and purity were the exception. The other's pull was never so strong he had trouble remaining himself. With wood, water resulted in days of going around healing the trees, of chasing injured animals so he could heal them. When he caught one, he'd replace wood with fever, and water had tempered that need enough, he'd return to himself. During another practice with the two elements, the animal he'd wanted to heal gored him, and Tibs had nearly let himself die continuing to chase because helping it had been more important than anything else. He'd reflexively removed the corruption that built in the wound as well as the festering, but hadn't done anything about the bleeding, so eventually grew weak from the loss of life essence. He'd tried to suffuse himself with purity, which only resulted in him channeling the lone element, returning him to himself. Purity in water caused the need to soothe and calm all the plants and animals. It was enough like channeling water back before he could remain himself that working that out with both was easier. Water and earth resulted in days of sitting, doing little more than being calm. Earth need for things to be slow playing into it. He didn't know what pulled him out, barely recalled thinking during that time, but he returned to himself famished and shaking with weakness. A test of purity with air and earth only led to an increase of what they caused by themselves, so returning to himself was easier. Tibbs sensed the group he headed toward, almost 30 people. The numbers made him reluctant to stay on the trail, but more than half were injured with untreated infections, and two carried on the crates containing weapons. One of the two had so much corruption it was now eating at their life essence. They could use his help. And they would have information, maybe not about anything leading to a possible dungeon, but they could tell him what had caused those injuries. He heard them before he saw them and raised his voice. "Hail, traveler! I am alone and not seeking conflict." He doubted they believed him, but at least now they wouldn't be surprised when they saw him, which would result in them turning aggressive. The sound dropped to that of rustling as they stopped moving. "Advance slowly," a man yelled. "Keep your hands visible. We have crossbows at the ready." "I am advancing." He kept his hand away from his body, wishing he'd taken a sword before leaving the city. Unarmed travelers were suspicious. He could make a blade, but hadn't bothered studying leather or worked wood to the point he could make imitations of them. Channeling an element could explain his lack of a weapon, but he had no idea how they'd react to an adventurer. They were on a smuggler's trail, after all, and Tibbs couldn't think of one stories about someone with an element not being an adventurer. Purity would make him a cleric, but those never traveled alone. With no way to explain any of the elements, he didn't bother. He stopped when the men and women with crossbows pointed at him came into view. They were among the healthier looking of the group, and they still looked like they'd been in a fight against tougher opponents. Those with injuries were easy to identify, so he said, I know something of healing when they didn't lower their guards. You an alchemist? She searched beyond him. No, just someone who's had to learn the ways of the wilds instead of risking the roads, and those who disagree with how I live my life. Learning which plants heal became needed after a few of those disagreements. You aren't armed, the man said. Tibbs forced a chuckle. A bear decided my camp was in its land and didn't give me the time to gather my things before evicting me. I have been foraging. They exchanged a concerned look. And you can heal our injured? She asked. I can look at their injuries and do the best I can, but from what I see, what you need are clerics. They whispered, and Tibbs didn't bother bringing the words to him. What mattered was what they did. They lowered their crossbow. Any help you can give will be appreciated, she said. Tibbs immediately absorbed the corruption and festering from all of them. He wished he could do more, especially with the two severely injured, but his purity etching healed too quickly to be natural, and since he could use raw fever to undo his injuries, he'd never worked on an etching with that element. He could heal others the same way, but couldn't control the speed or the order. So anything visible would come across as unnatural. While he looked them over, he used fever to heal internal damage, but that still left 7 of them, on top of the 2 on the crates, with grave, visible injuries. He could do little for them, without revealing he had an element. The one way he could think to help was to cover the injuries, so they'd be too far by the time they realized what he'd done meant magic to object. I need bandages. Do you have anyone with knowledge of the plants? Our herbalist was killed when... She looked away. That meant no one would know he brought the wrong plants. I'll need their mortar and pestle. He'd ask about the attack later. And someone with a container to carry the plants. I'll need a fire with water boiling. There's a river in that direction. The woman who was assigned to help him was the youngest of them, and she didn't question any of the decisions he made while picking plants. When they returned with a cloth sack full, the fire was going with a cauldron over it and a barrel of water next to it. One of the men had gotten worse, in spite of Tibbs's previous help, and someone was already cleaning the leaking wound. Clean any cloth you have, he instructed as he set about mashing plants. He removed any essence he thought might cause problem, then spread them over fresh bandages before applying those over the open wounds. He added herbalism to the list of subjects to read up on. It would be a good identity when he didn't feel like traveling as a caravan guard. He removed the corruption and festering that had reasserted, and once the wound was covered, he made the smallest purity itching he could think of and applied it. He had no idea what to do about the man's high fever. About the man's high temperature. It was an aspect of fever, the one the element was named after, but while too much would kill, books said it was needed, a part of protecting the body. He had to hope that with removing the problem, that would take care of itself. He used the rest of the herbs, treating the 2 on the crates, but instead of having to stop to get more, the woman who'd accompanied him presented him with a sack of more of them. It contained the plants she'd watched him gather. He hoped the mixing of them was confusing enough they wouldn't attempt to treat further injuries with them. He was treating the last by torchlight. And he didn't have to act tired when he stopped. A purity etching had kept the exhaustion at bay, but it wasn't a cure for it. The steaming broth in a mug a man handed him smelled wonderful after a day of rotting flesh and plants. Thank you. They gathered around the fire with the worst injured almost too close to it to keep the forming chill from making their condition worse. I hope you won't be offended, but what happened? I was led to believe this trail was safe from bandits and guards. The two who had welcomed him, who seemed to be in charge, exchanged a look. None of the others even acknowledged his question. It should have been safe, a woman said. It's never been like this. Two rainy seasons ago it was safe. There was nothing there. There was, the man said. Tibbs looked from one to the other. There was what? They exchanged another look. For a few years now, she said, travelers have reported seeing things back on the trail. A week's travel or so. It's flat plain, used to be trees in the distance, but they died off. It's where people said they saw lights. Fire? Fires, he prompted in the silence. Camps? She shook her head. Like stars over the ground, shimmering. They called to some, those who those who couldn't, those who couldn't resist didn't return. Call? You're going to want this capitalized. Yeah. Call? You mean they're curious about them and go investigate? A call, the man said. I saw it happen. People walk to them without reason, just a need. The last time we warned them we warned them. We warned them the last time. We warned them the last time. Still had to restrain two of them. They kept going on about what they wanted was there. That they needed to find it. The next day, they had no idea why they'd wanted to go or what they would find there. All they remembered was the need they had to go. But that isn't what happened this time. Monster, someone whispered. Tibbs didn't see who, but there was no light on the word. Hadn't been on any of the words. I don't know about that, a man said, but it was stone, the previous speaker said, bigger than any wolves I've seen. Blades skipped off it. It gored Rotnik before anyone knew it was there. Lalia, he looked at the three resting on the crates. You saw what it did. The worst of it, the woman leader said, was that once it injured someone, it no longer cared about them. As if it was more interested in making as many of us suffer instead of, when it stopped, she picked up. It was to drag Anita away. It dragged one of the dead away? As unanimal-like as the attack they described, that was. I wish I'd been dead, a woman said. I think I was just about the only one not to get hurt during those attacks. I was pushing it back when all of a sudden it was under my shield, bit my calf, and pulled. He saw little of her in the firelight, but from what he sensed, she was the strongest of them. A stone creature, larger than a wolf, made it a dungeon-made one. But that didn't mean there was a dungeon nearby. The lights were tougher to explain otherwise, as was the pull to them, to go to them. Dungeon creatures that escaped their dungeons were always dangerous. Everything he'd read about them said that. They could only escape once a dungeon made them with a sense of autonomy, like the dogs still made on his first floor. They'd been so much like ordinary dogs, Tibbs had been able to bribe them with jerky. He didn't know if Stowe was exceptional in having creatures like that on his fourth floor, but even on that floor, creatures were dangerous. If one of the dogs had escaped, it would have acted like in the dungeon, attacking anyone it came across. That the creature injured instead of kill felt like a test of a runner's perseverance. Would they turn back or push forward? That it tried to drag someone uninjured back to... He had no idea what that could be about. In a dungeon, the challenges were limited to a room. Neither Stowe nor Furman had creatures take runners from one to another. And the lights? The pull to go to them? It had to be a sense work, but as far as he knew, it could only happen within a dungeon's influence, if there was one. Could it reach it to the trail without the dungeon itself being noticeable? How would a dungeon be if it was on a plain? Furman had used trees to make its room and halls. You're quiet, the man said. Just taking it in. I've heard bards sing of creatures, but always thought it was stuff they made up. My advice, the woman said, is to turn around. The trail isn't safe for a lone traveler. Someone chuckled. Is any trail safe for someone alone? This is the wilderness. He's been lucky to make it this far. Luck's not a thing, Tibs said reflexively. The man chuckled. Who told you that? He shrugged. Just something we know back home. Well, luck's how we survived this, the woman said, and I'm not putting it to the test again. This is the last time we're taking this trail. Tibs nodded. Is the trail harder to follow through the plains? To the plain? He'd deal. That's going to be capitalized. He'd deal with the creature and investigate the lights. The next group of smugglers to take it would only have the wild animals to worry about. Slightly, you know what? There's not going to be a slight. It's outright easier. Easier, actually, the men said. The grass is so trampled it barely grows over the trail. You hardly need the markers once you reach the plain, she added. Then I'll stay with the forest and look for the trail on the other side. You won't make it, she said. Those lights probably reach further than the trail. You need someone who won't hear the call to keep you from going to them. I'm telling you, it's best if you come with us to Gestiston. We're returning to Estecarest by the road, and we'll keep you safe from anyone who might disagree with your life. It's the least we owe you for the help. Thank you, but I can afford the delay. My business is urgent. It won't happen if you follow the trail, she stated. I'll have to risk it. Death is preferable to disappointing him. That doesn't sound like someone you should head towards. Tibs grinned. I could tell you what he does to me when he's happy with me. As he'd hoped, as with most people, being willing to speak of things special people got up to in the open made them stop talking with him. Of course, the few times it didn't work meant he had to make up stories. Fortunately, Jekyll and Krosef had given him a wealth of them, and he'd, unfortunately, picked up a few more over the years. And that concludes Chapter 95 of Stepping Wild. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that by about 20 chapters, that is on Ream Story. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.